Now that the paladins have been switched to different lions, it would be anticlimactic to have them switch back. Or would it? Let's take a look at their character arcs for a little insight. Whoosh. It's us. First, I just want to state that this video is mostly me exploring how the paladins returning to their original lions doesn't necessarily have to be a setback for them, and how I think their character arcs could possibly be setting them up to return to the original lineup. My hope for this series is for me to get to know these characters better by examining how the lion switch has affected them and may affect them in the future. Also, conjecture is fun. So on to the analysis. Although I love Allura as a paladin, to me it seems like an odd choice. We've already been given the beginnings of not one, but two arcs for this character, and making her a paladin doesn't seem to serve either of them. Firstly, we have the arc introduced in Rebirth and continued in Blackout. Allura seems to possess powers that she does not yet understand, and I think that something we'll see in upcoming episodes is her learning about her powers and gaining mastery of them. Her second arc begins in the belly of the Weblum and continues in Hole in the Sky. The second storyline is about Allura learning that the world is not as black and white as she thought it was, and deals more with her maturing as a person. One of the reasons why I believe Allura has to learn this particular lesson is because she is meant to teach it to others. Remember the Puigians in the first episode of Season 3? I believe Allura is being set up as the person best suited to uniting the people of the galaxy in an era of peace because she has had to overcome her own prejudice and desire for vengeance. The only benefit that seems to come from her piloting a lion is that now she gets to experience fighting on the front lines instead of always being on the castle ship. And we get to experience the joy of watching her kick butts and take names. But that doesn't really affect her arc any. Another thought to consider is that with an ensemble cast, not everyone can share the spotlight at once. Certain characters need to step back at times so that others can receive arcs and character development and all that good stuff. Keith wasn't a major player in Season 1, but he has been these past 2 seasons, while Season 3 has sidelined Allura, Shiro, and Pidge. Does that mean that Keith was meant to be the main protagonist all along? I don't think so. In the storybook by David Babouline, he states the plot should be directly influenced by character development and vice versa. It's like a feedback loop. In Voltron, we see that in action. Whichever character is currently in the spotlight is the one whose actions, development, and even backstory are moving the plot of the show along the most. That's why Lance has also been getting a meteor arc, because he, as a character, is helping to move the plot along more now than he has before. Shiro disappearing is a huge learning curve for the 4 other paladins. As we've seen, Shiro is the one who is best at navigating interpersonal conflict. When the other paladins bicker, he de-escalates the situation. When the other paladins need comfort or guidance or assistance or protection, he's the one who provides that for them. Without him, they have to learn how to actually be a team and solve team conflicts themselves. They can no longer count on Shiro stepping in when their disagreements get out of hand. Not to say that the team was weaker with Shiro, and that him being gone is the best setup, but as long as Shiro is around, he's going to try and carry as much of the burden as he possibly can. All 5 paladins need to learn the importance of shouldering the responsibility equally. For Shiro, this means healing, the thing he needs most. He and Keith are very similar in that they think they can handle all of their problems on their own. Although Keith is a loner because he has trust and abandonment issues, and Shiro... well, Shiro is the last person on Shiro's list of people to take care of. See? Here's the official list from DreamWorks. Keith's issues make sense because of his background, but we haven't been given much insight into why Shiro's mind works this way. It doesn't make sense for Shiro to never be a paladin again. As we saw in Crystal Venom, Shiro doesn't feel worthy to be a paladin because of what he had to do to survive, and also because of what Haggard did to him. Sidelining him permanently would be confirming his worst fears. Putting him back into the cockpit of a lion is the resolution that makes the most sense for Shiro's story. But for him to be a paladin again, that means that someone else would need to step down. Based on my thoughts on Allura, it would make sense for her to either relinquish her position as a paladin entirely, or for her and Shiro to share it. But what about all the bonding that Shiro and Black did, or the close bond between Keith and Red? What about Lance and Blue? Although I know that Keith is technically Space Zuko, there is a small part of Lance's arc that reminds me of Zuko's, specifically Zuko's arc in the 2nd season. Both are insecure and desperate to prove themselves, Zuko by reclaiming his honor and therefore his father's love and his place in the Fire Nation, and Lance by proving that he's as good or better than Keith at being a pilot and deserves to be at the garrison, and later that he deserves to be a paladin. At the end of the 2nd season of Avatar, Zuko made the shocking decision to, apparently, throw away everything he had spent that season learning, betray the only person that had consistently believed in him, and go back home with his emotionally abusive sister. When I finished that episode, I was very confused and a little bit angry. What were the writers thinking? How did that make any sense story-wise? Well, once you've watched the entire show, it makes a heck ton of sense. Zuko had to get everything he had ever wanted so that he could learn how empty that victory was. He had to learn that his father would likely never love him, even when Zuko finally got everything right. So, how does this relate to Lance? Ever since Lance has been introduced, he's been Keith's shadow. The only reason he was promoted was because Keith dropped out. The only reason Lance is in the Red Line is because Keith is now the Black Paladin. I don't think that this is meant to show that Lance has become a better pilot than he used to be. although he has, look at those moves. Rather, I think that this illustrates that Lance is still being put in a place where he's constantly the spare Keith. Him taking back the mantle of Blue Paladin wouldn't be a step back for him, because it would be a sign of him owning himself as his own person. Not Keith 2.0, just Lance, the one and only. Like Zuko, I think he has to achieve what he's been avidly pursuing so that he can realize it isn't what he needs or in the end even wants. One of the reasons why I think that Lance was the Red Paladin instead of Allura is that whoever pilots the Red Lion is the right hand of Voltron, or another way to think of it is that whoever pilots Red needs to be complementary to whoever pilots Black. If the leader of Voltron has a shortcoming, then the Red Paladin is the one who is meant to step up and fill any gaps. We see this with Zarkon and Alfor. Zarkon was a warrior and a commander who was motivated by power. Alfor was an alchemist who followed his gut and was motivated by the desire for peace and prosperity. Keith was a good counterpoint to Shiro because Keith was more objective and mission-oriented, whereas Shiro was more compassionate and people-oriented. Allura would not have been a good fit as Keith's right hand because the two of them are too similar. Remember in the Arc of Taujir when they independently came to the same solution to the problem? They both needed the reminder that Shiro gave Allura. We are always stronger together. An interesting tidbit I noticed in The Hunted was how both Keith and Allura had a crisis moment where they realized that their stubborn refusal to ask for help was landing them in heaps of trouble. Who was it that guided them out of their personal crisis? The Blue Paladin and the Blue Lion. To me, this seems to thematically link Lance with Blue, implying that no matter what line he's in, he's always going to be the Blue Paladin at heart. The fact that Keith and Lance both kept their original armor also seems to be making the same statement. Also, for both Keith and Allura, the mission takes precedence over everything. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few is a code that they both live by. Even their own needs do not supersede the needs of the universe. With a couple of notable exceptions. For Allura, we see her judgment become clouded when faced with the chance to be reunited with her people, even if they are from another dimension, and Keith was unwilling to form Voltron without Shiro because he felt that was giving up on Shiro. It's been set up since season 1 that whenever Keith is about to run off alone to accomplish a scheme that he created alone, that Lance is always there like, bruh. Lance is also the link that ties Keith to Pidge and Hunk. Making Lance Keith's right hand makes sense because he is capable of getting up in Keith's face in a way that Allura wouldn't do. Not to say that Allura wouldn't get up in Keith's face if she disagreed with him, but she'd do it so much differently. When Lance is comfortable with an authority figure, he isn't afraid to make his point, very loudly, but at the end of the day he knows when to concede. Allura, though, not so much. As we see in Hole in the Sky, and on many other occasions, once she has her mind set on something, nothing can dissuade her. Keith piloting the Black Lion has been teased since Season 2, Episode 1. However, it's interesting to note that Keith has never wanted to. Even when put in the context of doing it for Shiro, he is still reluctant. When Shiro himself is all, "The Black Lion's chosen you, fam, you're gonna be rad," Keith is still like, yeah, but have you maybe considered that I don't want to? So this whole passing of the baton moment doesn't feel like a traditional passing of the baton moment. This is no Rey finally taking up the Skywalker lightsaber moment. This isn't Aragorn receiving Anduril and deciding to own up to his legacy and ancestry. This ties in directly with what fake Shiro said in The Blade of Marmora. Keith feels like a selfish person, probably because he's been told that before by people in his life that he looked up to. Even though I don't believe that Shiro would have ever said anything like that to Keith, it's significant that those words came from him in the show. Keith is desperately afraid of disappointing and thereby alienating Shiro. Keith would never put down his foot and say, "I'm not piloting the Black Lion anymore, it's not what I want," because he's too afraid of being rejected again. However, I think it would be an important turning point for Keith if he stepped down from being the Black Paladin and the others accepted his decision. A lesson that he needs to learn is that pursuing what you want doesn't always mean that you're being selfish, and that you can rely on others to support you, and that you don't have to do everything alone. So, more like 2 or 3 lessons, actually. With that information in mind, it's easy to see how Keith could resume being the Red Paladin without it being a step back for his development. However, something else to consider are the outside forces. For instance, we still don't know whether or not the Shiro who's come back to the team is a clone or not, and we don't know how bad the rift between Keith and the team in Season 4 is going to be. Both of those things will have a direct impact on the outcome of the Lion Switch arc. In the 4th and final part of the series, I'm going to take a closer look at both the aforementioned outside forces and the storyline itself and how that affects the Lion Switch. As always, thank you for watching, commenting, and liking. If this is your first time with us, I hope you enjoyed the video. Well, I hope you all enjoyed the video. Bye for now!